a classic exotic from D1. The Titan's exotic helmet, the Helm of Saint-14, has been brought forward into Destiny 2, at the launch of the Curse of Osiris DLC. Just for reference, the Helm of Saint-14 in D1 provided a simple, yet effective bonus to your Ward of Dawn. The exotic perk on the D1 Saint-14 granted your Ward of Dawn a blinding effect to enemies that passed through it, which would continue to linger on them for a few seconds after they exited the bubble. This was quite a powerful feature in D1, since Defender Titans were borderline necessary in endgame content, and having the ability to keep enemies blinded while you're dealing damage or just trying to survive was an extremely helpful bonus. A particular place in D1 where this helmet saw a lot of use was the Abyss section of Crota's End. You needed to stay alive while the bridge was building, and given that there are endless thralls, hallowed knights, and ogres targeting you, an Armour of Light Saint-14 Ward of Dawn was your best bet of survival. That, or just stand on the cheese rock. Anyway, now we're in D2, so let's see what the new Helm of Saint-14 actually does. The exotic perk will again blind enemies that enter your Ward of Dawn, but will also temporarily blind nearby enemies when you're guarding with a Sentinel shield. Let's do some testing to see how long these blinding effects last. After deploying a Ward of Dawn bubble, enemies that enter it will become blind after about a second, so chances are they will hit you once on their way into the bubble. If they continue to stand inside the bubble, they will remain blind, but if they leave, the blinding effect will remain on them for an additional 5 seconds. So it seems to work very closely to the D1 Saint-14, but let's try the Sentinel shield guarding feature. If you use block with the Sentinel shield, all enemies around you will be blinded for about 2 seconds. A bit underwhelming, but it may give you enough time to get a quick res or something. I should also mention that the blinding effect is only caused by the act of blocking, not by the blocking itself. Meaning if I block with a shield and walk through enemies, it won't do anything, but if I start blocking near enemies, it will affect them. Honestly, the limited range and duration of this perk is a shame, since it would probably be a great exotic for mobile sentinels, but only get in a very brief window in which you need to block right next to an enemy, unfortunately hinders this exotic's potential a bit. Still, there are many great places to use this exotic, so let's finalise the build. The Saint-14 will have a recovery mod by default, which I personally wouldn't change, but a Void Paragon mod could also work. We obviously need to play as a Sentinel with this exotic, but we're not strictly bound to one skill tree. It would make sense to use Code of the Protector, since this exotic works with our Ward of Dawn, but I would recommend trying Code of the Aggressor instead. I mean, if you want to actually use your Ward of Dawn as your super with Saint-14, then absolutely use Code of the Protector. But I'm much more inclined to use my super as a shield, so Code of the Aggressor is going to serve me a bit better. If we're going to use the bottom tree in Sentinel, we need to build appropriately. I really like the combination of the Crown Splitter Sword and the In the Trenches perk, which can give you chunks of super energy back in a hurry. So now we need to consider where we'd want to use this. Let's start with PvE. Unfortunately, Ward of Dawn has completely lost its appeal from D1, since we're now forced into using Armour of Light as the buff, instead of Blessing of Light or Weapons of Light. Armour of Light was only ever used in niche situations in D1, such as the Abyss in Crota's End, or during Arcburn, Light Switch Nightfalls, or sometimes in the Crucible, since it gave you amazing damage resistance. On top of that, there were several perks in the Defender's skill tree to further enhance your Ward of Dawn, such as extending its duration or allowing it to produce extra orbs from incoming damage. Back then, Blessing and Weapons of Light took the stage in 95% of the content. Now in D2, these two things have been replaced with Healing and Empowering Rifts, which are nerfed versions of the D1 Blessing and Weapons of Light. So it's pretty clear that the community, myself included, aren't really interested in using Ward of Dawn in D2, at least not in its current state. The Saint-14 definitely does improve your Ward of Dawn, but I just don't think it improves it enough to justify use. There really aren't many environments in PvE that would suit a blinding armor bubble, particularly since the removal of enemy elemental burn and light switch modifiers. My idea for the Saint-14 would be to use the aggressor tree and work exclusively with a blinding guard feature. Use your shield block as a defensive measure to revive teammates, or to push through heavy fire in strikes or raid encounters. The added bonus of blinding nearby enemies is never going to be bad, but at the same time, it's not all that strong either. So in PvE, would I recommend using this? In Ward of Dawn's current state, with the type of content and modifiers we're all accustomed to, probably not. It's not a fault of the exotic itself at all, it's a fault of the subclass perks. If I was going to play as a Sentinel in PvE, I would go with Doomfang Pauldron, or maybe Mask of the Quiet One. Rarely would I choose Saint-14. Now for the Crucible. Armour of Light was always interesting in D1 PvP, to say the least. If opponents saw you in an armour bubble and didn't have something specifically for it, such as a Fist of Havoc, Nova Bomb, or Dark Drinker ammo, they would typically just wave at you and then run away, or go for a hero play that likely resulted in them getting killed. To put it simply, Armour of Light bubbles with Saint-14 were occasionally seen in the Crucible, sometimes even in trials, and were a handful to deal with at times. Running into a Saint-14 bubble would completely blind you, and leave you vulnerable if you didn't kill the Titan in the bubble. Now in D2 Crucible, Ward of Dawns are very rarely seen, which is a bit surprising really, since armor bubbles can almost guarantee a round winning countdown, or secure power ammo. To recommend a build in the Crucible, I'd say the Code of the Protector skill tree would be the better choice, since an Armour of Light Ward of Dawn, in combination with suppressor grenades and the blinding effect from Saint-14, can be useful in some game modes. I did also try to use the guarding blinding effect in the Crucible too, and I really wouldn't recommend it. You need to be dangerously close to enemies for them to even be affected by it, and if you're that close already, you should just go in for the kill. Maybe if you can catch a group of enemies off guard then it might be worthwhile, but honestly the situation is going to be extremely rare, since enemy teams are notified in several ways when you're using a super, and will spread out and be alert to your presence. Using Ward of Dawn is far more defensive than using your Sentinel shield, but at the very least it's a lot safer and easier. So I guess to summarise Saint-14 in the Crucible, would be to say, if you like using Ward of Dawn, it's going to make it even better. Or even if you don't like using Ward of Dawn, Saint-14 may just change your mind. At the very least, try it out. Thanks for watching guys.